Morning Year 12. Thanks very much again for tuning in. This particular assembly is going to really follow on from last week, but you'll notice that I'm starting this particular assembly on a Tuesday rather than a Monday. That really made sense considering what announcements we received yesterday, and I thought that it would be best to just hold off just in case we got anything that was of value and anything specific that we could potentially talk about so that you're completely in the loop. So yesterday we had further announcements from the government after Sunday's televised address. There was quite a bit of detail that was released at the very end of yesterday, and as a school, and Mr. Kilbride particularly, he's going to be looking over this closely over the next week and speaking to other colleagues from other schools, particularly heads, to see how best we can potentially facilitate this plan. So just to be absolutely crystal clear with you and to make sure things are transparent, yesterday the government announced that if the rate of infection, which they're calling R, falls in line with their projections, then secondary schools should prepare from the 1st of June to host contact time with Year 10 and Year 12. Now, this is very different to the plan that they have for reception Year 1 and Year 6. And what they stated in their 50-page document was that the situation for Year 10 and 12 students wouldn't be like a normal timetable. So our main reflections from this is that if this does happen, and remember it's still an if because it's all based on the rate of infection, and it's all based on whether schools can risk assess effectively for this, that it won't be a complete return to normality. But what it will be is that it will be a way of supplementing remote learning that's taking place still at home. As a school, we need to ensure that we can do this safely before sharing any plans. So there's no plans in this particular assembly, this video. Mr. Kilbride will be talking about that, and as soon as they're created and as soon as it's safe and as soon as it's been consulted on, then they'll be shared obviously with you. It's still obviously all conditional on us all doing our part as we have been doing already. So the most important thing that we need to do is follow the advice that's been given. It has changed obviously since Sunday. I know for a lot of you that it might be the case with different family members that you're still thinking that the stay at home message might be the one that you'll be following, but the stay alert message is obviously going to happen from tomorrow, from Wednesday. So if you do have any questions about it, please do ask, but it might be the case that we don't have any specific answers at this particular stage. And so back to notices. Once again, really well done on your work this past week, cracking on with your classwork under these circumstances. Remember to email if you are unsure. So if you haven't quite completed something, if you're falling a little bit behind, you've got to let your teachers know. You won't be alone in that. There's a few people that are finding this difficult, but it's so important that you keep that contact going. EPQ online lessons will be on, the next one will be on by the end of play today. Likewise, the same with AS Thinking Skills for anyone that's doing that. Virtual speaker talks are again available on Speakers for Schools. They'd be useful as well if you are keeping up to date with your personal statements. And the final one is one that we've mentioned for the past few weeks, and we're going to be organising ready for next week. So again, we're trying to front load this so it's out the way, so that you don't have to worry about it if we do return in some capacity for the summer half term too. So Prefect Interviews will be held over the phone next week. And Miss Sparks will be contacting said students via email as to who's going to have that phone interview. These are only for the remaining students who haven't had an interview so far. So if you had an interview with me, then you won't be having a Prefect phone interview. She'll be sending you an email with the time, and we'll be asking for a contact number that we can ring you at that particular moment. It might be that we give you a ring on an unknown phone number. So just be aware at that particular time. It will be about a 10-minute talk, so nothing too onerous, and the questions will be along the lines of these three. So why do you want to be a prefect? What experiences do you have that would equip you for the role, and what ideas do you have? It is not something that I want you to be worried about at all. If you're finding that the time that we've allocated for you isn't possible, and you wouldn't like to do it, or there's a problem with the particular time, then just email Miss Sparks back with that information. That's not a problem. We're trying to do this at the very end of the half term, because obviously the main focus is your studies. Societies and supercurricular, remember, there's no pressure to get involved. There is a new debate, and we're doing it on a different format. And thank you again to Zaina and Noah for sorting this out. What we'll be doing is we'll be posting the results and sharing that. We've got a lot of students involved in the younger years, so it'd be great to see some Year 12s involved as well. May's book for the Literature Society is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. It's available for free on Audible. We'll be sending out further details at the end of May as well about sharing your thoughts on that, trying to do it slightly differently than what we did for the April book of the month. And finally, many of you might be missing out on sports, so keep setting challenges, and from tomorrow as well, there will be, there's the new advice that you can go out for unlimited exercise, but please ensure that you are following the social distancing guidelines along with that. Right, today what I want to do is I want to talk about your personal statements, and I want to talk about how you should be creating them. Now, we've already told you that you should be going on to Unifrog and you can be filling it out there in your initial thoughts. It's great to see so many people have already done that. Remember, this is all front loading. It's all something to just get it out the way so that you don't have to worry about it later. I'm so impressed with the amount of people that have taken the time for this. Remember, if you haven't done it already, absolutely no problem with that. But what I would suggest is if you front load it out the way, try and get it done it's like a rough draft, remember, not a completed version, a rough draft in May, then it's going to make things a bit easier when we're concentrating on work in summer half term 2. So I just wanted to go through the general structure for your personal statements. And I did say before that we're going to predominantly focus on the non-Oxbridge students. If you are applying to go to Oxbridge, then still do this particular structure, and then we'll just tweak it and we'll make sure that it's appropriate for Oxford or Cambridge. So we did say already that the first section, or the first paragraph, in a lot of people's cases, is usually on why you want to study that particular subject. So in that paragraph, we should be seeing the following 4 things. Your knowledge of the subject area, so you should be showing that off. Why that subject area interests you, and remember, we're not looking for cliches on that. What interests you most about that particular subject area, and that will tie into point 1, so that will be something where you can hopefully show off your knowledge of the subject area by being specific. And then finally, where your studies could lead. So when I did my personal statement, I obviously applied for history, as being a history teacher, and what I did is I talked about my interests in World War I as a particular area, and what I did is I talked about a lecture that I'd been to, which was on the history of plastic surgery, and particularly how plastic surgery was developed during World War I after the first aviation accidents. And what I was interested by from that was how war can actually be a tool for positive change. And that was something that was very specific on history. And what I wanted to do was not do a cliche. I didn't want to focus on something like the Nazis or World War II. I wanted to focus on the history of medicine. In that final section where it says where your studies could lead, I didn't really know at that particular point, so I kept it fairly vague. I said that I'd be interested perhaps in going into academia or potentially teaching the subject. It wasn't a contract, it was just saying here's what I potentially was thinking. Now, what's good about Unifrog is if you go to the subjects library, you'll find that there are example personal statements that students have used that you can have a look at for all different subject areas. So this is one for business management, for example. And if I'm looking at this straight away, I can tell, even without reading it in lots of detail, that this person has already mentioned some specific areas. So there are certain key terms that jump out at me. I've seen here perhaps some links to different management styles, authoritarian, democratic, and bureaucratic. I've seen as well that this person has done some reading because they're talking about Howell Raines and his autocratic management of the New York Times. I can see that there are, again, specific key companies that are mentioned. So what I can notice from this particular paragraph is that there are that student has done some research and is interested in certain management areas and has used those particular buzzwords. Now, in terms of where that student might go into, I think it's quite clear, not from a single line, but that this student wants to be a manager in the future. So it doesn't have to be clearly spelled out where your studies could lead to. So that's the first section of your personal statement. The second section is what you've done in the past that makes you suitable to study that particular subject. Now, that can be quite tricky for a lot of people. And there are a few hints and tips that I'll give that hopefully will make that a little bit easier. But you should be trying to include 6 different things. What academic studies you've done already that relate to this particular subject. So think specifically about your A-levels and your BTEC subjects. What have you done in them that makes you suitable to study that particular subject? So you might be wanting to study geography at university, and you study geography, economics and history. Well, what is it in economics and history that you study that will impact and help your desire to study geography at undergraduate level? What particular project work you've done in your studies? Now, it might be the case that you haven't done any project work at the moment if you're not doing a BTEC subject, but in the forthcoming months, you might want to amend your personal statement because you'll be doing things like coursework in certain subjects. It might be as well that you've done certain experiments, or you've done certain practicals in your science-based subjects that would help you with your undergraduate course. What kind of things have you done online? What kind of things have you read from books and newspapers and TV? What hobbies and interests do you have as well? So if you're embarking on things like an EPQ, it'd be useful to talk about what you've done in your EPQ and how that perhaps links. And again, if it doesn't quite link from a subject capacity, what skills are you developing in your EPQ that are also skills that are useful for that particular subject? And again, if you're doing a higher apprenticeship application, it's exactly the same. Have you done any relevant work experience? Now, work experience is obviously going to be problematic this year, and it might be difficult to get new work experience, but lots of work experience is being done online. So that Speakers for Schools program, and that link that I put in one of the first slides, that would be useful to look at. Lots of people are trying to do this online. Unifrog have even put some ideas out, so I'll share them with you as well. So it could be that you have to be creative. And finally, have you done any voluntary work that would make you suitable to study in that particular subject area? So for example, with mine for history, I helped out in a care home, and I spoke to residents about their experiences during quite turbulent times, and I talked about the impact of oral memory on the development and writing of history and recording of history. So again, if I was to go on Unifrog and I was looking at business management, this is the second section for that same personal statement from the start. And you can see that straight away this student has spoken about what subjects they're doing: business studies, government and politics, and history. But they've clearly linked in the next section how they relate to business management at university level. They've talked about their hobbies, so you can see that this student is interested in playing rugby and other sports, and you can see at the very end that this person has talked about the things that they've learned online. So they've talked about going on the BBC News website, reading the Business Insider, the Financial Times. It could be useful for the student to perhaps give some specifics, but what they've done is they've kind of tail-ended the paragraph with a brief talk about one particular company and what they did. What I would say is the more specific you are, the more likely it is that you're going to stand out. So if you've read something interesting in a MOOC, if you've read something interesting in an article, if you've read a particularly interesting book, that's something that would be great to talk about. And finally, section 3 is about how you can become a positive contributor to that undergraduate and university life and that community. So this is your opportunity to talk about any hobbies or leisure activities that you haven't mentioned already, any sports, music, drama, any of those activities that you could have recorded on Unifrog before, so any kind of significant responsibilities that you have. Now again, it might be worth you just doing a draft at the moment, and that's what we're saying to people, and then if you have additional responsibilities as and when they come up, you can add them to your paragraph. So for this particular student, again, they spoke about what they've done with their rugby. They've talked about the fact that they've moved away 8 years ago, working with people that have played rugby with people that have moved away 8 years ago. They've also talked about the value of working in a team capacity, and really this student has mainly just focused in on one particular area. So it's not a case of trying to cram in as much as possible, it's more talking again about the competencies that you can develop from these particular activities. The final thing that the student's done, which lots of admissions tutors really like, is by doing just a very brief conclusion, and that's really just wrapping up everything. It shouldn't be too long, and it doesn't have to be incredibly exciting, but essentially it's just wrapping up what you perhaps want to do after you complete your course. If you haven't mentioned it already, it might be the case that you just want to summarise a few different points. If you're struggling with that final summarising section, then just ignore it. It's not a problem, and we can do that at the very end.